Welcome to episode 41 of Everything Sports with Aman and Devin. I'm your host, Aman Adkarni,
And I'm your co-host, Evan Garber.
and we talk about the hottest topics in sports over the course of the past week. And in today's episode, it's just going to be a Super Bowl episode where we share our thoughts about the Super Bowl that a lot of people witnessed between the Rams and the Bengals. And the Rams did get away with the win. And we're just going to talk about that the entire episode. And so before we start, remember we post at the beginning of the week on Monday and then at the end of the week on Friday. And before we start, also make sure to follow our Twitter because we're going to post a lot of sports news over there as well. And that's all the announcements about the podcast. So let's get into the episode. So the Rams, Bengals, Super Bowl 56, the Rams 23 and the Bengals, unfortunately, 20. So now, share your thoughts, Evan, on the Super Bowl.
Yes, I thought it was a really, really good game. I feel like a lot of it went as I kind of guessed. Obviously, I didn't guess the MVP right with OBJ going out. They say that they fear that he had tore his Achilles, so prayers up to him. But yeah, it was a really, really good game overall. The D line definitely dominated for the Rams. The O line couldn't hold up for the Bengals. I think that really cost them the game.
Yeah, that's honestly the story of the Bengals season, actually. They got lucky against Tennessee that Burrow got sacked 9 times and they still won. And now I believe it was 7 sacks, which ties the most sacks in Super Bowl history. So, this is literally telling you to fix your offensive line. And yes, you couldn't do anything during the playoffs, but if you want to be back in the Super Bowl next year or whenever, you need to get players to build your offensive line because Aaron Donald was a monster yesterday, especially in the clutch. Even though he was contained most of the game, but then Aaron Donald had 2 sacks, 2 tackles for losses, obviously, and then the clutch stop, which ended the game pretty much when the Bengals had to go for it on a 4th and 1. So it was crazy, man. Crazy game, crazy way to end the game, and that's Aaron Donald for you right there, just showing up in the clutch. He's won almost every award a defensive player could win because honestly now the MVP is just looking like a quarterback award, even though it shouldn't be. But it's turning into that. So there's speculation he could retire. I don't know how true that is. I was surprised to find out before this episode that Aaron Donald's actually 30 years old. I did not know Aaron Donald was. I thought he was still 26, 27, maybe 28.
Yeah.
But he's been in the league since 2014, so I guess that kind of makes sense now. NFL for 8 years. He's won Rookie of the Year, Super Bowl champion now, 8-time Pro Bowl, 7-time first team All Pro, 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, 2010's All Decade Team, 90 plus PFF grade every year, and only 2 games missed were both not injury related. The guy is just amazing. I don't know when's the last time we saw an unbelievable defensive lineman like him. JJ Watt's the only other monster defensive player in recent history that's had this big of an impact, and now JJ Watt also is one of those players that just needs to win a ring and then his career is officially over pretty much because JJ Watt's been there, done that for everything about the defense. Similar to Aaron Donald now. Aaron Donald's officially amazing. Cooper Kupp, Super Bowl MVP, exploded this entire season, then exploded in the second half. And Evan's prediction of OBJ becoming Super Bowl MVP, that was a good chance of happening had OBJ not gotten injured. So the Rams took a huge gamble, mortgaging a good amount of their future from Matthew Stafford, and now they have a ring for it. So now it is all worth it. So, any more thoughts on this?
Yeah. Sorry. I find it pretty crazy that actually Aaron Donald's gonna retire. Like you missed only 2 games and both non-injury related. It's kind of interesting to see him thinking about retiring this early in his career. I mean, usually you see players end their career early because of injuries, but he's never gotten injured that severely. So it's definitely very interesting.
That is
And
true.
then yeah,
Sometimes it's like the fear of injury and their bodies take a huge toll. Like Luke Kuechly, for example, he was a monster, absolutely monster linebacker, and he retired when he was like 29, I believe, because he didn't like his body taking a toll and everything. But sometimes these players just retire early, and it's sad to see them retire early because football is a massively contact sport. So that's
yeah,
crazy if he
yeah.
does.
And I actually also saw something that Sean McVay could retire somewhat soon too. He said in an interview once that he doesn't want to be around football his whole life. He said he really enjoys the game, but he said he wants to like hang out with his family and do other stuff with his life. So he might actually retire also.
That is true. That is actually very true. But I mean, dang, this is a question I posted on Twitter right before this episode, actually, about is Joe Burrow the next Dan Marino? In the sense, like, I'm not comparing their play styles and everything, but Dan Marino went to one Super Bowl and never went back. Could Joe Burrow be the next one? Like, you never know. It's hard to predict sports in general. Like, if you guys saw my episode for the predictions right before Evan came on as a co-host on this podcast, I was 5 for 6 in the wild card and then got zero predictions after that, right? Zero. Other than actually. No, yeah, I picked the Buccaneers over the Rams as well. I got zero predictions after that, right? So
Jeez.
rough
Yeah,
NFL playoffs in terms of predicting, but I think that just goes to show you that this NFL playoffs was actually very unpredictable. Any team outside of the Eagles and Steelers had a legit chance of winning the Super Bowl, in my opinion.
yeah. Well, I think that kind of answers your question too. Is Joe Burrow going to make it? Um, it kind of leans toward yes when you think about it, because there's no dominant teams. It looks like there's definitely a pretty good chance. But then you also think about quarterbacks in the division, or not like that conference, like Mahomes and Josh Allen. They're going to be dominating for years to come. So it might be tough for him to come back.
That is true. And I mean, OBJ, I don't know how they'll actually incorporate him because Robert Woods is going to be healthy. Maybe they'll
He's
move
going
on from
to
Robert Woods. I don't know, but OBJ proved he is still that guy despite his down years in Cleveland. But with Robert Woods, I just don't know how you put him and Odell Beckham Jr. together because now OBJ being the being the wide receiver too, he has flourished in LA. And if you insert Robert Woods. Maybe Robert Woods is gonna become the wide receiver 3 if they still keep him. So it's definitely gonna be interesting how the Rams manage their off season. So that's also another topic to think about.
Yeah, they got a lot of big free agents, so it's gonna be tough for them to re-sign all of them. Um, I definitely feel like they should trade Robert Woods. Uh, Obviously, yeah, you don't want to. I mean, you do want to have three great wide receivers, but at the same time, you kind of don't. Uh, and also, his injury might raise a lot of concerns. And you don't know how he'll play when he comes back, so you might be conservative and trade him now before he comes back and he's just trash.
Agree. And so let's see. Robert Woods is not a free agent. So, I mean, yes, like you said, they'll have to trade. Estimated 2022 cap space minus 13.5 million. It's the fifth lowest. It's the fifth lowest. And the
Wow.
LA Rams haven't tagged anyone over the last 3 seasons. A fun fact. So, I mean, no, they actually have no that notable free agents other than Von Miller, who actually was played a big role in that. I mean, can Von Miller retire? Like that's another question. Do you
He
think
could.
he'll retire?
Uh, I don't know. I think he could retire, but I feel like he wants to play more football. I mean, there was rumors earlier that maybe he might return back to the Broncos after this season. I don't see it happening. But yeah, I think he's gonna continue to stick around for a little bit.
He said he was playing for Demarius Thomas in the Rams Super Bowl. That is really good guy right there. He is only 32 years. Dude, if I'm being honest, I thought Von Miller was older than 32 years old, just like how I thought Aaron Donald was a bit younger.
Yeah, me
Aaron
too. It seemed like he
Donald,
could come up.
Odell Beckham Jr., Sony Michel, Brian Allen. I mean, they're just average guys apart from Vaughn and Miller and Odell Beckham Jr. So, I mean, if you can re sign half of them, then you're still competing. Then you
Yeah,
definitely.
I mean, there's definitely obviously concerns with possibly Andrew Whitworth and Aaron Donald retiring, so that might play a big part. And then OBJ might have tore his Achilles.
Really?
Yeah, or was it an ACL or Achilles? I think
I thought it was
it was
ACL.
ACL. Oh, ACL. That's what it is.
Yeah,
My
Rams
bad.
fear torn ACL for OBJ. That sucks, dude. That sucks. Well, I mean, I don't know how long OBJ is out because Cam Akers returned from his like torn Achilles way earlier than he's supposed to. But my gosh, dude, this I kind of felt like it was a torn Achilles the way he went down, but then I'm like, it might not be because he did walk off kind of on his own power too.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
NFL players are now advocating for NFL to not have artificial turf because so many injuries are caused on turf. And 90% of NFL players, according to Nick Chubb, one of the top running backs in the league, prefer real grass. And in 2020, he sprained his MCL on artificial turf. George Kittle, artificial turf. There was that, I think it was not this season, but last season, where that week 2 came and every NFL player was getting injured. The Niners, Nick Bosa tore his, was it ACL on artificial turf? And then I think it was the same with Jimmy G as well. Yeah,
Yeah,
Nick Bosa would there's so many NFL players that hate surf right here. So I feel for OBJ now, and that goes back to my question: is depending on how long OBJ is out, you could keep Robert Woods, but that is going to be
Yeah,
a big hole to fill if indeed Aaron Donald does retire. I think prioritize re-signing your guys. Andrew Whitworth has been a key for the Rams, but I feel like that's a that's still a pretty big loss, but it's more minor than the other potential losses your team could be suffering, in my opinion.
yeah, I agree. Uh, oh yeah, you cannot replace a guy like Aaron Donald. It's like basically impossible. There's no one like him. There haven't been anyone like him since maybe like Lawrence Taylor or something.
Exactly.
He's an irreplaceable guy. So yeah, obviously you're going to be missing him if he does retire. But I feel like the team is still really, really good.
Exactly. But I feel like you just gotta address some of the unknowns to start thinking of competing, in my opinion. But it's it's crazy how the it's just crazy about the Rams season. This is very, very crazy because oh my gosh, like they got Stafford. Getting Stafford in itself brought a lot of pressure on your organization, brought a lot of pressure on Stafford, and boy, did they deliver. And Aaron Donald is like so electrifying to watch. It's so electrifying to watch. I mean, any more thoughts on this crazy Super Bowl?
Yeah. Well, I feel like when they signed a lot of these guys like OBJ, like Whitworth, or like, well, they had Whitworth the whole time, but like Aaron Donald, obviously going in the season, you had to have known that these guys are gonna might thinking of retiring. So it definitely was literally could have been like, oh, this is it. This is a chance. So they had to go all in. They did that. They got the Super Bowl. Congrats to them. Hopefully, you see Joe Burrow back in it soon.
And we touched on it at the beginning of this episode, and we'll touch on it again. Prioritize your offensive line, Cincinnati. Please, because in recent years, I feel like there has been some Super Bowl teams that just have digressed the following season. And you don't want Joe Burrow to pick up so many injuries after getting so many sacks. Like he hurt his knee or something like that and still played through it. Like Cam Newton, he was great for a while and then just injuries costed him after so many, frankly, not being a biased Panthers fan here, but Cam Newton got a lot of cheap hits. You don't want that on Joe Burrow when he gets injured and then falls off quicker than many people expected him to. Joe Burrow is a special quarterback and you need to protect him. And I get there's going to be some games where your offensive line slips, but you cannot allow 9 sacks in a game and then 7 sacks in a game and expect to win the game. That's just my opinion. Prioritize your offensive line, and then you're probably the best team in the AFC. What do you think?
Yeah, if you want Joey Franchise to be Joey Franchise, you want him to be your franchise quarterback, you gotta protect him. You cannot let him get injured, like you said. Yeah, that's literally their one hole. I feel like their defense was pretty strong yesterday. Obviously, they let loose a little bit. Cooper Cup got open a lot toward the end, but that's because he's just a beast. So yeah, offensive line is definitely their priority. If they had a good offensive line, they could have won that game.
Oh, by
But
far. Like they only ended up losing by 3, but you can point fingers to the refs, which some people are actually pointing them to, like they didn't throw flags until the end of the game. the holding on the defense, that was a very, 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 very questionable call. The holding on the not Rams defense, Bengals defense for holding Cooper Kupp on the game-winning drive. And then a missed false start call on the game-winning drive as well on the Rams. But then at the start of the second half, I saw the play after because we were playing basketball outside, but T. Higgins face masked Jalen Ramsey. So they missed calls on both ends. If the Bengals won, everyone would point to that play. And now that the Rams won, everyone's pointing to that play. So I think there were missed calls during the game, but I feel like there were missed calls on both sides. Missed calls for the Rams and missed calls for the Bengals.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of interesting that they didn't start calling a whole lot until late in the game. But I feel like most of them were penalties. Obviously, the holding on the defense was kind of questionable. But yeah, you kind of you just want to see him play. Like if you're not gonna call anything most of the game, just don't call anything at all unless it's like really really obvious. Just let him play football.
Some calls were obvious though, but I'm just saying like the holding wasn't the Jalen Ramsey T. Higgins play where T. Higgins face masked him was pretty obvious. The false start, I feel like, is obvious in some cases. So, I mean, you can point the fingers everywhere, but the bottom line is the Bengals wouldn't have been in that position if they just had a good offensive line.
Yeah.
Seriously, like
Well,
that's why they were 2-14, then 6-10, even though Joe Burrow got hurt, and then they get Jamar Chase and they're the best in the league. But I feel like no one would be pointing the fingers at the refs because the Bengals would have won with a good offensive line. So they would have been leading, and the missed penalties wouldn't have mattered, in my opinion. What do you think about that?
yeah, I totally agree with you. Um, I find it interesting that at the end of the game when Aaron Donald got that last sack, they stopped double teaming him. I found that very interesting. Like, it was working the whole entire game, and then one play, you stop doing it, gets a game-winning sack. Very interesting call.
Yeah, very interesting. And then I think they stopped double teaming Cooper Kupp as well.
Yeah, that's why he's getting
OBJ is
so wide
not on
open.
the field. I feel like one of those guys could have handled Van Jefferson and then just double team Cooper Kupp like you were doing all game.
Yep,
But I mean,
exactly.
still though, offensive line has to be the priority for the Bengals because Burrow's going to take a lot of sacks, and then his career is going to be derailed, very derailed. So you don't want him to harm himself. Like, forget about his career. This is like an actual man. You could suffer life-threatening injuries because you simply can't predict all these things. You cannot. So get an offensive line to protect Joe Burrow is a bottom line. Do you agree, Evan?
Yep, totally. I mean, we saw what happened with Alex Smith too. He almost had his leg cut off. We don't want that to happen to Joe Burrow. We don't want that to happen to anyone.
Exactly. I mean, with that, that ends our Super Bowl episode. We shared our thoughts on the Super Bowl. Remember, we post at the start of the week on Monday and at the end of the week on Friday. Make sure to follow our Twitter for all the sports stuff and have a great week.